Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are back in the news for big reasons. Joining me now to talk about it is one of our Toronto contributors, Brian Lilley. Brian, they're both out. Tell me more about that. What happened?
Yeah, they are gone. Dramatic moments on Tuesday, late Tuesday afternoon in Ottawa. The Liberal caucus held a meeting. Now, the Prime Minister, get this, the Prime Minister scheduled to speak in Toronto at a big fundraising event at 8:30 at night. 8:30 at night. It takes about an hour to fly to Toronto. It takes him about half an hour to get to the airport. And yet, just before 6 p.m. on Friday night, he's holding court at a Liberal caucus meeting to announce that Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are out. Jody Wilson-Raybould actually tweeting this out at 5:44 p.m. Now, why is that of significance? Because the Liberal caucus meeting to decide her future was scheduled for 5:45. So before the caucus meeting even began, the Prime Minister had made the decision. Both of these women are out. Part of the reason why, the recorded phone call that we'll get to in a moment of Jody Wilson-Raybould speaking to the clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Wernick. The Prime Minister called it unconscionable that she would dare to actually record a phone call. Wait a minute. What about actually trying to subvert justice? What about trying to get a sweetheart deal for a company charged with bribery and corruption? Is that not unconscionable? Apparently not in the Liberal caucus these days. So, strangely, not a lot of pushback from the Liberal caucus on this. I would have expected more, but they all seem to be lining up behind the Prime Minister because they know that he is their ticket if they're going to win in the fall election. And that's looking less and less likely by the day.
Brian, many Canadians are talking about that very phone conversation you were just discussing between Jody Wilson-Raybould and the clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Wernick. What did that phone call really tell us?
Well, it's about 17 minutes in length, and I believe somebody counted it was 17 times that he tried to get her to change her mind on giving a sweetheart deal to SNC-Lavalin. Look, this construction giant out of Quebec is facing charges of corruption and bribery. The allegations are they bribed Libyan officials to the tune of $48 million to get government contracts, including buying a yacht for the son of Muammar Gaddafi, that horrible dictator who was behind the Lockerbie bombing, taking down a jet plane that killed Canadians, that killed people from around the world, and put a Pan Am airliner in a field in Scotland. A man that suppressed his own people, that killed his own people who were political dissidents. Those are the people that SNC-Lavalin was dealing with and offering bribes. They took them on a cross-Canada tour filled with prostitutes. I mean, they were paying huge sums that I don't understand how. This is not my forte, but I still look at they kept receipts. They kept it as a business expense, and you look at it and you say, what? That's what this company was doing. $48 million they spent on Libyan officials. The other allegation is they defrauded Libyan organizations of $138 million. And this is the company that we're trying to save. So Michael Wernick tried 17 times in a 17-minute phone conversation to try and get Jody Wilson-Raybould to say, no, we're going to give them a sweetheart deal. She had looked at what her director of public prosecutions had determined and said, I'm good with this. I'll stand with this. This is how the law reads. I'll stand with the rule of law. They were trying for political considerations because they feared the loss of votes in Quebec to try and get a sweetheart deal. She said no, so she got fired.
So, Brian, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott punted from caucus. The news comes as the written testimony of Jerry Butts was released. Brian, we saw the context of the emails and text messages. What did they tell us?
It was bizarre to me that Gerald Butts would want to release these. I don't know what Jerry was thinking, because he actually said in his letter, so he sent a letter to the committee, and then he sent about 39 pages of text messages and handwritten notes, and then transcripts of the handwritten notes, because his writing's so bad, they had to actually have them typewritten so that people like you and I could read them. He said in his letter to the committee that this backs up what I said. Now, I asked several people, am I reading this, through a partisan lens? Am I reading this through rose-colored glasses? Am I just seeing what I want? And even people that weren't on board with my view on the SNC-Lavalin scandal said, no, I think you're reading it correctly. Jerry Butts' testimony and his written notes back up Jody Wilson-Raybould, not him. the Liberal supporters, the backers that are sticking with the Prime Minister say, well, his notes never mention SNC-Lavalin. Okay, well, those are notes and text messages from someone who, as we see in the Mark Norman trial of Vice Admiral Mark Norman, they were scrupulous in not keeping notes. Well, he was very vague in most of his notes. And then when he was detailed, it backs up Jody Wilson-Raybould. She said in a phone call, I'm being shuffled out for other reasons. I don't want this. You are punishing me. Things like that. That backs up her testimony, not his. Hal, every day it seems like the Liberals come up with a new idea on how to make things worse for themselves on this. They have kept this scandal alive as much as anybody else, as much as the reporting by the media, pressure by the opposition. It's as if they wake up in the morning and they have a conference call and they say, wow, yesterday was really bad. And then somebody says, hold my beer, I'm going in. And then they just make it even worse.
Brian, the carbon tax has been here in Alberta for just over 2 years now. We've had to deal with higher gas prices, heating costs for our homes and businesses. Well, now the carbon tax officially took effect April 1st in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, and many in those provinces are not happy about it.
Yeah, well, here in Ontario, pretty much every member of the PC caucus, that's the governing Ford progressive conservatives, was out on Sunday taking photos or videos of themselves pumping their gas and saying, make sure you fill up before the carbon tax kicks in on Monday. It went from, depending on where you live, $1.15, $1.17 to, well, about 4 to 5 cents higher. And once you add in the GST, it's about a 5 cent per liter hike. Some people mock this and they say, well, that doesn't amount to anything. If you have to fill up your tank several times a week, Hal, adding $4 to $5 to a fill up, that starts to hurt. That starts to be an annoyance. And the strange thing is that the rebate that you get, because I've been through the forms, and it differs whether you live in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or New Brunswick. They try to come up with averages for how much you drive, how much it costs to heat your home, and so on, and then give you the rebate based on that. It's very unlikely that the government claim that you will get back more than you pay actually pans out. If you're a downtown dweller that does not drive, that takes public transit everywhere, that doesn't have to drive kids to hockey practice, ballet practice, skating lessons, soccer practice, any of these, if you don't have to do that, you're probably fine. If you rent a car once a month or you rarely drive like my grandparents, I remember my grandparents would drive to groceries on Friday, church on Sunday, and the car stayed parked the rest of the week. Those folks are doing fine. Everybody else is going to pay more.
And you have to pay more as well for heating your home. I just got my recent gas bill. It was $22 in carbon tax alone, and the GST on top of the tax, taxing the tax.
Here in Ontario, Enbridge is talking about an 11% hike just on your home heating bill. That's significant. I mean, think about this. How many times have you heard politicians denounce cable companies or phone companies or cell phone companies because of a huge increase? And then they all run out and they denounce it. And they say, this is horrible. There ought to be a law. We should do something. We're going to clamp down on them. Well, wait a minute. You guys just pushed this up. Not the company. You did. And they're all out defending it. I have to say, in the case of Catherine McKenna, the environment minister, quite badly, she was asked about tax breaks and benefits for small businesses that are really going to be hurt in a radio interview. And I literally heard her say, due to this, people will be able to go out and buy things at Canadian Tire. I have no idea what that meant. I have no idea why she said it, but those were her talking points.
And the Trudeau government began an ad campaign to get more Canadians into buying into this carbon tax.
Yeah, this is a wide-ranging ad campaign. For the last week, 2 weeks, I have been hearing about it nonstop. Make sure you get your climate action incentive. That's what they're calling it, okay? Good Orwellian newspeak. Climate action incentive. There are radio ads. I got something in the mailbox. It was sent to every home in the 4 provinces I listed where this carbon tax has come into play. And they're going to be showing TV ads soon. There will be ads ahead of movies. There will be ads in newspapers. It's going to be great for the media. So it's great for you and I, Hal, is not great for people. I mean, they're spending so much to tell us about it. I wonder how they're going to be able to make us all rich, because that's the promise, right? You'll be richer than what you pay. Uh, I don't think that's true, because they never include the indirect cost. They never include the cost of the head of lettuce going up, or your kids' jeans going up, or your jeans going up, or that nice tie you're wearing costing you more. None of that's going to be included in this. So there's a lot of wiggle room here. There's a lot of weasel words going on. It's unfortunate that that's the way things are, but that's the reality right now when it comes to the carbon tax.
So what's the status on the two court cases against the carbon tax, one involving Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe and the other Doug Ford in Ontario?
So the Saskatchewan case was heard earlier this year. I believe it was around the end of January that they had their court hearing dates. I've been hearing from people that we could hear within the next week what the result will be. But at this point, I don't have a date yet. So I'm not willing to say. Maybe, if we're going to find out next week, then we would likely hear by Friday what day the court would release its decision. If not, then it'll just be put off into the future. It's always a guessing game with trying to figure out when court decisions will come out. But Saskatchewan's had its day in court. They had very solid arguments on the constitutionality of this, the fact that this was not a tax under the general taxing powers of the federal government, that applying it to certain provinces but not others violated the spirit of federalism. Many other good arguments. Ontario's court case will go before the Ontario Superior Court in about 2 weeks. So we could have a decision from Saskatchewan by then. If Saskatchewan wins, the feds will appeal. If Saskatchewan loses, I'm sure they will appeal. Now, Ontario backed Saskatchewan's case. They were interveners. In the Ontario case, which they also have their own solid arguments, they're very different from Saskatchewan's. Those will come out. I believe the court dates are April 14th and 15th. And then Saskatchewan will act as an intervener in that case. So this is going to be going on for quite a while. So in addition to all the troubles that Justin Trudeau has with SNCLavalin, he's got to fight with 4 provinces. And as the Conservatives have been pointing out, look, Rachel Notley of the NDP is not exactly a fan of Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax. So if she wins, which is a long shot in the Alberta election, she's not on board with what he's doing. If Jason Kenney and the United Conservative Party win, he's going to get rid of the carbon tax and join the fight. And Wade McLaughlin, who's the Liberal Premier of Prince Edward Island, he's not on board with it either. So they've actually got 6 out of 10 provinces against this now.
Wow. The canola clash with China continues, another big issue here for a lot of prairie farmers. Now, the feds are considering sending a delegation to China, and there will be special hearings before a parliamentary committee. Tell me more about that.
So the parliamentary committee is going to hear from Marie-Claude Bibeau. She is the agriculture minister, newly appointed in the most recent cabinet shuffle. And Justin Trudeau's had a lot since January, again, all related to SNCLavalin, but she's taken over the agriculture file. She's not overly familiar with the canola issue. She's not overly familiar with the issues of Western farmers. Now, I have to say, most canola in Canada is grown in the prairie provinces, but there's a significant amount in Ontario, especially Northern Ontario. It's not really a crop in Quebec, where she's from. So this is new. She's got a steep learning curve. Jim Carr, international trade minister, he's from Manitoba, Winnipeg area riding. He's got a bit better handle on this issue. They're going to be appearing before the committee. As I've told you before, Hal, China is always a little bit protectionist on this because they have an inferior product. They're still using rapeseed, which is what canola came from, but we figured out how to make it taste better, genetically modified. So they're always trying to protect their own farmers. But this attack on Viterra, on Richardson, on other exporters, this is nothing but an attempt to use trade wars to settle the scores on Huawei and the arrest of their Huawei CFO, Meng Wanzhou. So there's a lot of high-level politics in this. Unfortunately, Justin Trudeau has blown his political capital with China a long time ago, and I'm not sure that this high-level delegation to China will work. I'm not sure we're going to get an awful lot out of the agriculture minister. Hopefully, Jim Carr will give us a bit more.
We've discussed the new trade deal between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico many times, or the USMCA. Brian, it appears as though the new deal may be held up, but this time not by Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's going to be the Democrats, which is actually not a surprise because the Democrats are not as trade friendly towards Canada as Republicans. And I know that surprises an awful lot of Canadians when I talk to people about this, but Republicans are normally much more trade friendly. Democrats are much more protectionist. Donald Trump kind of turned that on its ear. And all of a sudden, you had Democrats cheerleading for a new NAFTA that they've always hated, just because Trump wasn't for it. Anyway, so we got a new deal. But now Nancy Pelosi, who is the House Speaker for the Democrats, she's saying until Mexico reforms its labor laws, we are not going to ratify this deal. So that could slow things up for Canada. Now, if you remember back, part of the deal, especially around autos, was that, well, Mexico had to raise its wages because the big complaint from both Canadian and American manufacturers, whether it be autos or anything else, is that Mexico pays very low wages. So they're frustrated with this. They say, we can't have a level playing field if you're paying $2 an hour down there and we've got to pay $16 to $30 an hour. So they came to an agreement. They came up with something. Mexico would lift up its wages. They would change their labor laws. That hasn't happened yet as per the deal. And Pelosi says until it does, no ratification. So could be another delay. We'll see. This has been a very dramatic thing. We've had a lot of delays, a lot of snags along the way, and then eventually things sort themselves out. But if it happens this time that things are delayed, it won't be Donald Trump. It will be Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats.
Tony Clement says he will not be running in the upcoming federal election. Brian, he admitted his shortcomings and is looking for a path back.
Yeah, of course, Tony Clement, longtime provincial politician in Ontario who became a federal MP in 2005. I've been covering Tony Clement since about 2002, and very accomplished parliamentarian. Very accomplished guy. He was on the National Security Committee of all parliamentarians. This was a multi-party committee. It covered the House of Commons and the Senate. And of course, he had that scandal surrounding inappropriate images on Instagram, attempts to basically blackmail him over those images. He thought he was discussing things with women that were not his wife. He says he's been spending the last several months focusing on his family and getting back to that. He said it was an easy decision. He said it wasn't a difficult decision to leave politics at all, that he spent the last several months focusing on what matters and that he wants to keep doing that. He, as you said, he acknowledges shortcomings. He's asking for forgiveness. He is thanking people for their prayers. So, hopefully Tony Clement, a man that had an awful lot of respect on all sides of Parliament, let's hope that he does get back to the right path on this.
Yeah, we wish him all the best, Tony Clement. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.